Hey, what's going on, everybody? ChazmaN here, and we are back once again with not exactly a main episode of the ChazmaN podcast, but something me and Phoenix were wanting to do is to kind of touch on some of this crazy news that has kind of been floating around just today. I guess real quick, just on screen, there should be some audio locations for you guys. There's also some social media locations there for you. And I guess just getting right into it, Phoenix, how have you been since the last time we got to talk?
Pretty good. I mean, we're still in the nice spooky season, so still enjoying all that. Still riding high from our Halloween Horror Nights trip a while back. So,
I,
kind of fun we get to hop on. I know it's not a especially spooky themed episode, but still it's a Halloween stream, so
mhm.
enjoyable nonetheless.
I guess I should say, since Phoenix brought it up, if you wanted to see our actual Halloween special, feel free to check out the last podcast. That was I forget, we ended up deciding to make it that. Why? Because we wanted to talk about Halloween Horror Nights, and also we just were able to
Right.
get all three of us, including MetalGamer, and on that
Yeah, I
episode.
think at the time we didn't have solid plans to do the podcast in October, so that was kind of our one chance to go ahead and do some spookiness or spooky goodness.
Mm.
But events changed, and we had an opportunity to hop on to talk about some of the sadness that's occurring right now in the game industry, particularly affecting Sony, Bungie, and the like. So
And I guess I should also add in that we normally typically would have gone live with our next official episode next week, which we still plan on doing. But I don't know, seeing as how I'm getting ready to go on like a 5 or 6 day vacation, and this stuff was kind of like you said, it kind of was just thrown in our laps, and it's kind of been what everyone's been kind of talking about today. I feel like this
yeah,
we could make a whole conversation out of this. And I've also felt like it wouldn't have done it justice for us just to throw this into like a speed run news topic where we try and rush through it as fast as we
it would
can.
have taken up the entire speed run. And honestly, if we wait too much longer, I feel like we're gonna kind of miss, I don't know, kind of the impact this is having right now. I mean, I'm sure we're gonna hear more about what this particular event means as far as the impact it's gonna have on Sony and kind of the fallout from it over the next week or two. But right now, it's a big deal, and I think there's
Hmm.
a lot to kind of dig into as far as what this means for Bungie, Sony, just the whole kind of landscape of those companies
And
and
I
how they're gonna move forward as far as their gaming plans.
and I totally forgot to add it to the notes, but we will definitely need to get into not only what this means for those two companies individually. What does this mean for like gaming as a whole and how studio structuring operates? I mean, we'll be the U word. Everyone earmuffs the U word. Um, right? I mean, that's something that people have been saying needs to be within gaming for like ever with
Yeah.
companies.
Now, is it taboo to say it?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, unionize. Just
Unionized,
there
yeah.
you go.
But yeah, we'll
But
get into
anyway, let's hop into it.
yeah. Um. So yes, you want to go ahead and just dive right on in. So let me move over. So so yeah, kind of just diving right in. Just today, it looks like Bungie decided to lay off around 100 staffers, um, and delaying two of its pretty much future titles, or yeah, Marathon and Destiny 2's major expansion.
And to
Um,
clarify, I think it actually started yesterday. I'm pretty sure 30th was kind of when things started hitting the fan, and it's kind of just rolled over. And today we've gotten some more details about how the layoffs went down and whatnot. But before we get, I think, too deep into
oh yeah,
what's
yeah.
happened, let's kind of run through our, I won't say our history with Bungie because it's not like we're overly connected to it, but we've been playing Bungie related games pretty much since the beginning. I remember playing back with Marathon. I don't know if you played back in those early days,
Mm-mm.
but certainly since Halo, whether it be CE, Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo Reach, for those who stuck it out for that for 343, ended up taking over in 4. And I know for you and me in particular, Destiny, at least D1, that pretty much destroyed my life for a couple of years. And I mean that in, I guess, the best possible way.
Phoenix wanted me to play Destiny with him so bad he went out and bought me an Xbox with Destiny,
No. I
just
fixed
when
your
the
other
game came out.
Xbox that was broken by buying you a new one.
He
Destiny has happened to be pre-installed.
Yeah, I literally was like, what? Because I remember he had been talking about this game for like a month or two, like nonstop, and I was like,
But you were playing it
the
on the
360.
360
Oh
still.
Forgot about
And
that.
I don't know how many people like remember like when Destiny first launched. I mean,
It
it
was
was
so
technically a
pixelated.
yeah, I mean, it was supposed to be for current gen at the time, which was Xbox One, PS4, but they released PS3 and Xbox 360 versions, and man, those things ran like garbage. But you know, if it's what you had, it's what you
I
had. So that's how
totally,
I hooked
I totally
ChazmaN.
forgot. I've got my 360 copy somewhere back
Yep.
there. That was rough.
But anyways, I mean, for all its up and downs, I really kind of came to appreciate Destiny 1. Like, if
Hmm.
you're a Destiny player, you know the ups and downs you have, and sometimes you hate the game, sometimes you love the game, and often it's both at the same time. We feel the devs are constantly fighting you about what needs to be changed or tweaked or improved. They remove a feature, add a feature, but you know, it's that standard kind of live service model. But I think at the time, that was really, at least my first taste into that type of game. Like, I know it was not like a true MMO, but it was kind of MMO light, and it was my first kind of true foray into that. But I don't know, I really fell in love with Destiny 1, the gameplay, of course, and the some of the expansions that I thought were, you know, really solid towards the end. Taken King, what was the very last one? Wrath of the Machine.
Oh
That was
yeah,
really good.
Wrath the Machine.
Um, and then going into D2, I don't know if you felt the same way. I stuck out D2 for about a year. I felt like it changed too much for my
Well,
liking. I felt like it took a lot of steps backwards.
well,
And I remember, I think my last straw was I tried to get a bunch of us together to do like one raid like live together because we had, you know, been trying to make arrangements to finally do this thing. And then something fell through last minute, and I think I was just so frustrated I was done. I don't think I
well,
played Destiny since.
well. Remember, prior to Destiny 2, at the end of Destiny 1, they did the thing that we all were speculating and hoping they wouldn't do. We all were like, "Wow, we really hope they don't take away all these different systems and all these different things that were
Yeah.
part of why Destiny 1 was so fun." And they kind of just did that. Like, it almost felt like just a reset. And it's like, it shouldn't have just felt like just a reset when this is, like, I get it, it's Destiny 2, but they had claimed Destiny was supposed to be this, like, 10-year thing. You know, they had, like, a
To be
10-year.
fair, it has been. I mean, we're getting on, or we've already hit the 10-year mark, or very, very close to it.
Yeah, but.
But you're right. Like
Mhm.
Destiny 1, it was this journey of getting it to what I thought was the perfect state for like Destiny 1. Like towards the end, Destiny was really high quality stuff. Even if you didn't play it, a lot of people like to trash talk Destiny, but if you didn't play Destiny 1 at its peak towards the end, you missed out on something. But yeah, when you got to D2, we all hoped, okay, you're going to start at D1 and just keep on going.
Mhm.
They went way back. They removed a lot of like systems and tweaked a lot of things. And I stopped long before they got there, but to my knowledge, eventually they got back to basically where D1 was inside of D2. I mean, part of it was bringing back old content, changing systems again. For me, it was a little, you know, too little too late, but I know a big community still exists for the game. They kind of stuck it out. I think I've enjoyed it on and off for the years. So I have a lot of, you know, affinity towards Destiny. And I guess Bungie, at least the development team throughout all of it. Like I had a lot of fun experiences with Destiny and kind of working through it. So this recent news is certainly heartbreaking for a bunch of reasons because, you know, I feel like, and this is kind of jumping ahead in our conversation, but I do feel like this is maybe the final nail in the coffin for Destiny for many, many people. I don't know what its future is going to look like beyond it. So it makes me sad to know that that's just not going to be a thing potentially at some point.
This.
And more importantly, you think about the devs that are now
Yeah.
being affected. Like, especially this close, like the holiday season, this is just a kick in the gonads, and very, very disheartening to hear.
I think one thing that, like, we'll get into it, of course, more, but I think all of this mess means that they may have had higher expectations or were leaning on to Marathon more than I was expecting. Again, we'll get deeper into Marathon, but like, I mean, were they expecting that to like save them? I don't know. Again, I'm going too far ahead. But yeah, so
But either way, so we do have
yeah.
experience with Bungie and Destiny. I mean, not recent, so I mean, I've stopped playing for probably 2, 3 years now, so it has been a while. So I'm not as up to date on the community as I used to be, but I still feel somehow connected. I do feel
Hmm.
like I've been personally, you know, affected by this, even though I don't play the game very much. So
And then when you look into, like, you brought them up already, but like if you think about the legacy connections with Bungie, it's like, man, Bungie is the developer with the game that got me into playing Xbox. Like, I remember seeing someone, I think it was probably my uncle and you, playing
mm,
OG Halo on an Xbox, and that was like, Halo at that time was like, that was like, I mean, there were first-person shooters before it, of course, but that was like the big console first-person shooter, you know. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very very sad indeed. So yeah, again, as it's looking as if they missed a profit forecast of what, like 45%, which is that
Yeah,
mean
so
how, what's the time frame? Is that in between a certain year that you have that for?
I'd have to go back and pull this specific article. So the timeline on this is a little hazy. I think people are starting to kind of piece it together. To my understanding, within the past month and a half or so, they had a meeting where basically higher ups at Bungie were saying, "All right, we haven't met our expected forecast as far as our profits." They looked at a loss of 45%. But something to keep in mind about this is a projected profit. This isn't actual like
I'm
revenue they
looking at
brought
right. I'm
in.
looking
So
at right where you're. Yeah. Okay.
it doesn't mean they lost 45% of their revenue. I mean, we'd have to, I haven't seen those numbers. I don't know if they are up or down in terms of actual revenue brought in or actual profit. This is, the standard thing that a company does, right? When they have a really good year and then they say, okay, next year we're going to increase this tenfold kind of thing. And they have these really lofty goals for projected profits. And it seems like that's what a lot of this is based upon, right? You have these projected profits. They missed that projection by 45%. Don't know how realistic those projections ever were in the first place, but point being, they set a really kind of dire, I think, mood and tone for the whole Bungie dev team at that point. We're like, we really got to get back, player retention. They lost a lot of players. Part of that, to my understanding, I said I haven't played Destiny, intimately in quite a long time, so I missed
Are
recent
you gonna bring
expansions.
up them like not listening to the to exactly what their user base is like wanting and asking for? Like, which that
Yeah,
if that
well, I mean,
affects
that's
user retention if you're not doing what people want. Now, granted,
yeah.
people want a lot, but that could be hard to sustain. But
Well, any game like this that is, a quote unquote live service or any kind of, games as a service, there's always that constant struggle back and forth between the active players and the devs. The devs have to appease the players, but they can't also give them everything they want because there's game balance things to consider and they've got their own design decisions to make. So there's a balance there. I said I haven't been in touch with the community as far to know just how far off kilter that kind of relationship became. To my understanding, though, that one of the more recent or the most recent expansion, Lightfall, was really poorly received. I remember at least seeing plenty of articles about it when it came out that for whatever XYZ reason, at least the story wasn't up to snuff or whatever certain elements just didn't quite meet the
it
expectations of the
doesn't say
player
why.
base.
I'm looking right at that section. It just says poorly received. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get a chance to pull the articles for it hopping into this, but I remember it's been up for a few months now. I remember when the articles came out, the community was not happy about it. It's kind of, superfluously kind of looking over kind of peripheral of what the community was looking at. But yeah, the expansion didn't go on. When there's a poor expansion, that brings down everybody. Honestly, I think that's what kind of brought me out of Destiny. I think it was right around, was it Curse of Osiris? Is that the
I think
it was like
the first
it's
one is
been a while.
the first one is the one where I bailed. Yeah, Curse of Osiris, I
It
think.
was like the first or second one. So I said it's been a while since I've really hopped into Destiny, but that's the time that people hop out, right? I mean, you need a game that's gonna give you something to constantly invest in, and when the expansion, the thing that's supposed to keep you kind of engaged in the game, doesn't meet your expectations, that's gonna sever your connection to the game pretty quick. So I think that was probably a big reason they lost some players during this time. And that just, I think, led to a general dissatisfaction of the game. And, these kind of games go up and down, but this is a game that's been waning for a long time. Like, I'm trying to recall how long Destiny 1 was live before Destiny 2 came out.
I
I'm
think it
gonna
was like
guess
4 or 5 years. I think it was.
4 or 5 years. I want to say closer
Hmm.
to 4, but I could be wrong on that. So you got to think Destiny 2 is getting to that point or is past that point.
Because
And to my knowledge,
I played for like 3 years. I
what?
think. I think I played at
Oh yeah.
OG Destiny for like 3 years.
Yeah, and I think at this point, like Destiny 2 has just gotten pretty long in the tooth. There hasn't been any conversations of a D3. To my understanding, they want to stay with D2 as long as possible, and there's certain reasons to do so. But that's just hard to string on people that long for a game. I mean, MMOs do it, of course, but this game's a slightly different beast than a true
And it
MMO to a
and it's
certain extent
especially
too.
where, like, as we were talking before about them. I don't want to say, again, I haven't played the game in forever, but like it was a common thing that it was a common trend that we noticed in OG Destiny is whenever there would be a new DLC, they would say, "Oh, we're introducing a new faction or a new enemy type," and it would just be a previous enemy type that we had faced with a different color scheme or with a different outfit on it. And I would be curious from anybody down in chat who is a Destiny 2 fan, did that kind of malaise, was that kind of continuing on with Destiny 2 where, the same type of enemies, maybe with like a different ability or something? That always was like a thing. It's like, oh, here's the oh gosh, I'm struggling to remember Destiny enemies, the darkness. I don't know.
I know what you're talking about. Like, they definitely had reskins of things. I don't think I ever felt quite
Fallen
that
was
way.
one. No.
Yeah, man, I know what you're talking about. I don't know if that particularly is the big issue. I know with the Lightfall expansion, they added a new, what do they call it? I remember
Currency
new
types?
power.
Oh.
No, it was like a new power. Like, you had the, man, I don't remember the exact names. You had Arc, you had Void, you had whatever the fire one was, Flames. I mean, it had a bit different name. I'm sorry, Destiny community. They released a new one called Strand, which is basically a whole new ability set, and that was part of Lightfall, to my knowledge, or recent from that. So they were releasing new stuff, but point being, game's been out for a long time. It's hard to string people along without really giving them like high quality stuff, and when you don't meet a mark, that's a point that people are going to jump ship for XYZ reason. So point being is, at least up until about a month ago, state of the game, not overly well received. For whatever reason, they weren't reaching the profits that they thought they were going to. And I think there was just this big push to tell devs, you can do whatever you can to basically re-engage the player base, get them back on the hook, and keep this game growing. And then that leads us to yesterday, where, to my understanding, this was a complete surprise. People, I think I read an article saying that employees showed up, they looked at their calendar, and they all had a 15-minute meeting invite. And they walked in. That was the moment they started getting mass layoffs. People from all different departments are just gone. And to my knowledge, at least looking at it, it's hit just about every department of the dev team. So I know for big ones that got hit, the community managers were kicked off. So basically the face of, I don't want to say the face of Bungie, but the face of Destiny as far as who interacted with, the community, that was gone. So that's a really sketchy thing to do for a live service game that is very much, dependent on your communication with your community. To kill off that team is not a good idea. They lost a lot of QA. Other big profile things, they lost art and sound teams, particularly
Salvatore.
Michael. Yeah, Salvatore, who
was a big name.
I believe he was partners with Marty. Yeah, Marty
O'Donnell.
O'Donnell. That's right.
Yeah.
So this is like a vet. He is responsible for some of those iconic soundtracks and scores from Halo to now. And I know people have, just touted the work that his team has done throughout the entire Destiny franchise.
You could make the argument that the Halo theme song is as iconic as Chief, the game itself. Like those were legitimately part of the experience.
And I tell you, I mean, Destiny's a lot of things. There's a lot of, I think, good core things to Destiny. Like the gameplay, I know, hands down, is what usually people come back to. Destiny has always had great, solid gunplay. The other thing that I think has always been a big pillar of Destiny has been its art and sound design.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even when I didn't like the narrative, the game always looked incredible. I'm not talking about from a graphics capability. I mean, the game looked pretty good depending on, what system you're running on, etc. But the art design was spectacular. Taken King stuff was excellent. Wrath of the Machine stuff, and that's D1.
Taken
Even
King
D2 stuff.
Art style was probably the most memorable stuff. Yeah, in terms of looks.
I feel like rarely they've missed from an artistic standpoint or a sound standpoint. So to lay off some of the key members of that are clearly the ones behind that feel, that sound, that imagery that we come to kind of associate with Destiny.
Sorry, man.
That's a big thing.
I can still hear the Cabal theme in my head. The dum 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 dum. Like there's some songs where I'm like, I haven't even heard that in several years, and I'm like, oh, that's good music. Stuff like that goes a long way. Which I don't know. I feel like also getting rid of someone like Michael and Marty or anybody who has a legacy impact on a company like that, I feel like that's a real I can't think of the word. morale. That's a real, kicking the morale.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that's like it's like
especially when
if they can get rid of this guy, what do you think they're gonna do to me? Type thing.
yeah, tenure clearly had no protection. Like it wasn't your Teflon in this case. So
Mm-hmm.
and you gotta think too, it wasn't that anybody, to my knowledge, was fired because they did poor work. Like if someone had dropped the ball somewhere and their poor, production efforts or whatever led to the fall of something, then sure, you could understand or rationalize why they might be let go. But these were all people who were doing their jobs well, to our knowledge, and they were the ones laid off. And I think the big telling point here, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, but when you start thinking about what this means for Bungie as a studio, for Destiny particularly as a game, if you kill off what I look at as kind of the heart and soul of Destiny, the imagery, the sound, the art, they don't have plans, I don't think, of keeping Destiny going long term. At least not with brand new content, because how are you going to make new content that's going to have the same feel, same impact without the art team, without Michael and the sound guys doing their thing and adding that character to it? And to my knowledge, I mean, even though I know, looking over some recent articles, the engineering team got hit too. To my understanding, it sounds like they got hit a little less, and I could be completely wrong on this or off base. This is kind of,
Which that's
scanning across the
probably
articles.
good because they just want a foundation of
Well,
people to keep the game going.
well, that's
Maybe
what I mean. It sounds like when you keep the engineers, I mean, they're the ones, and these are your programmers, your network architects, your, live
they
service
let go
guys
of
who are
those people,
building
then
the
it's
online
like, oh, this thing
infrastructure.
might get shut off.
Well, no, I mean, I still think it's leading towards
Hmm.
a pseudo shut off to a way. My point being is you got rid of the people who I think are going to kind of stem the new content creation, right? The concept artists, potentially the sound designers, the guys who are doing the engineering. They're keeping the game afloat. Like they are making sure the gameplay works, fixing bugs, making sure the network connectivity is working the way it should. So they're the nuts and bolts in many ways of the game. So it makes it seem like, okay, they're going into a maintenance phase where they're going to release whatever new content they have because they have one more expansion coming out. But I think at least initially, and though there is a delay, but initially the new expansion was supposed to come out in February,
Mm-hmm.
which means good chance most of the sound, most of the art, most of the character to that was done. What they're probably doing now is implementing the gameplay, connecting all the pieces and nuts and bolts together, which that's an engineering thing more than anything else. So once they then put out that expansion, it seems like to me they're just going to kind of ride this game out. Now, I don't know if that's a good plan considering how long this game is going to have to ride itself out, but I don't know. That when I look at the people who've been fired, that's the feeling I get. But I don't know. It's 8% of the staff apparently, at least at this point, which Bungie's a big company. I want to
Mm-hmm.
say it was over 1,000 people. I could be wrong on the exact number, but it had grown
But I
substantially.
think the 8% was only like 100 people.
Right, but you
Yeah,
could
but
okay,
out of 1,000, so that's
eight
still a lot.
percent of a
Yeah,
thousand.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean
yeah.
that there's your 100 people just about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's a big hit. I mean that is not a small chunk out of that company, kind of spread amongst the entire thing. And these employees were hit at a really bad time. I mean, there's never a good time to be laid off, right?
No.
But going into the holidays, it's just got to really be a punch in the gut because you're going to a time where you want to spend some time with family, kind of relax, enjoy, and kind of be retrospective on the year about how the things you've accomplished. And instead, you're now job hunting and you're gonna be stressed out throughout the holidays, thinking, "Am I going to have a job when the new year comes around?" Like that's just a terrible place to be in. And to my understanding, and unless you want to hop in, I'll just kind of mention some of the specifics on what these employees are kind of being hit with.
No, good.
Benefits, they're terminated immediately. They had 1 day, I think, to cash in on certain benefits. I think depending how the layoff went through, they still have 3 months of health and I think
I got
severance.
it
So
right
it's not like
here.
they are
It's on screen if you wanted to look.
yeah, so it's not like they're completely dropping them in all regards, but in effect they are. I mean, luckily if some of them needed health insurance for a few more months, that's good. Apparently, what is it? I think their lead community manager, I think her name was Hippie. She just revealed that she had cancer. So that's, I mean, come on. And I'm not sure how well known that was internally. I would certainly hope that wasn't a spiteful thing by any means, but still, that's awful.
That's
So
terrible.
you got benefits being lost. The other one I thought was interesting. So I guess when Sony bought out Bungie, one of the perks was you got shares, or yeah, shares in Sony, correct? I think it was Sony shares specifically.
I have them. Where was it?
Yeah, shares in Bungie. I'm pretty sure it was shares in Sony. You can verify it. Point being that these were unvested shares. For you to actually make good on these shares and keep
You
them,
have to stay with
you
the
had to
company.
work for a certain amount of time.
Hmm.
Yeah, which I'm sure many people had plans of doing. I'm sure for many people, this was their dream job, right? They landed at Bungie, one of the top studios in the world. They were going to stick this out probably, in perpetuity. So now they've been fired, I'm sure, well before those shares became vested, and now they all default back to Bungie, or at least which means it's going back in the pockets of the upper echelon of the company, which is pretty
Oh,
crappy,
here it is.
pretty shady. So I don't know, lots of negatives all around. I mean, my heart goes out and bleeds for all those in game dev. Granted, this has been the recurring story and theme for pretty much the entire year in
This whole
game dev,
year, I mean,
tech in general over the past couple of years, but game dev this year particularly has been hit
it's just
real
like when you
hard with
think of
layoffs.
all of them, like who we've had Embracer. I know Embracer has had a couple layers of layoffs throughout the year. Um, I'm sure there's a bunch more. We've done so many news stories of us covering. Who else was it? Embracer. I mean, Embracer. Embracer is the one that's like in big trouble. They're in like the same type of situation where like
Microsoft even had some recent layoffs, didn't they? Not too long ago. I don't think they were in immense scale, but I don't think there's been almost any big
company,
company that
yeah.
hasn't. I mean, I haven't heard much from Nintendo, but that's a very different, I think, culture there, which honestly is probably something to really look at. But I think, and we can dig into this, especially when we start talking about Sony in a few minutes. But why has that been the case this year? I think the whole fact, if we just look into the Bungie situation, this probably stems from those projected profits, right?
Hmm.
These companies, we want to appease shareholders, get these really unreasonable, unrealistic, profit forecasts that they never reach, and then when they don't reach them, they have to do cutbacks to go ahead and try to, save face to their shareholders. And unfortunately, that comes back to cutting the people who are literally building your product, and that's just it. There's no good way to look at it.
No.
So um, do you want to hit on the very how was going to say this sentimental remarks by the Bungie CEO?
Sure. I'll bring it up right here. So yeah, as quoted by who is it? Pete Parsons, Bungie CEO. This is from Reddit, so I mean I trust Reddit. Thank you,
Yeah,
Doctor Nick. But no, I read this quote somewhere else. So
yeah, it was tweeted out.
yeah. It said for the text on Twitter, it said, as quoted, "Today is a sad day at Bungie as we say goodbye to colleagues who have all made a significant impact on our studio. What these exceptional individuals have contributed to our games and Bungie culture has been enormous and will continue to be a part of Bungie long into the future." Also said, "These are truly talented people. Please, if you have openings, I would highly recommend each and every one of them. Thanks. I'm sure your words at this time mean a lot to those devs."
Yeah, like I mean, they have to make a statement, but coming from the guy who was probably the one making the cuts and making those decisions, especially coming across this way, is so tone deaf. I don't know how else they could have spun that. I mean, there was no good way to spin this, but that was certainly not it. So I'm
Mm-mm.
sure that didn't give a whole lot of, reconciliation to any of those people who just lost their jobs. So, man,
It would be very
crappy.
interesting to me to figure out like I mean you probably answered it, but like to figure out how exactly what are the milestones as to like how these type of layoffs occur. I mean, I'm guessing like you said, there's probably some sort of dealings or meetings with what's his name, Pete Parsons and upper executives of Sony, and they probably talk it out and say, hey, if you don't, like you said, you made X amount this year, next year you need to make this. If you don't, we're gonna cut 8% of your workforce by October,
Yeah. So,
and it's just
so
like,
I guess this is kind of the
or they
a
tell
easy
him you need
segue.
to shave off 8%. We don't care where you figure it out where you need to make your cuts.
Right, and that's I think the big question right now although there's been some confirmation, I'm still curious who was really behind these layoffs. Was it, upper CEOs and echelon at Bungie particularly, so Pete Parsons, etc., or was this Sony? Because remember, Bungie is now owned by Sony. They spent what $3.7 billion or some nonsense. And when they were bought, there was that big, basically, promise by Bungie saying, okay, even though Sony's bought us out, no one's losing their jobs. We're not going to be, absorbed into Sony. Everybody's keeping their
For
positions.
now.
Like, yeah, like a billion and something and change was supposed to be done just to keep talent. So, I mean, they granted that was getting close to 2 years ago now, so it's not like it's super recent that promise was
Like a
made.
$4
So
billion
things change.
purchase. Almost $4 billion.
Yeah. Yeah, they paid a pretty penny to get Bungie. And to be fair, Sony didn't get Bungie just for Destiny, but we'll get to that in a minute. But
My
that's the question, is who is impacting these decisions? Pete Parsons did come out, I think, in an internal
okay.
kind of memo, or what would they call it? Internal something today.
Conference call
Internal
of some sort. Oh,
town hall meeting is
they
what they called it
they
for
started.
the
They've
company.
started calling those that. I've just started hearing about those like this year, because I think town hall
It's a
meeting.
common enough terminology.
Well, that also that I think that was where we heard of. Who was it?
It was an
What?
Activision thing, wasn't it?
There was some game that hadn't been announced yet. That during a town hall meeting or whatever, one of the CEOs said, "Oh yeah, we have this game coming out." And remember, we were like, Why would you ruin that announcement when nobody knows about this game yet? What game was
Yeah,
it?
well, they're not looking at it as an announcement. I think a lot of times when they have these meetings, although they should, I don't think they think about how public facing these the minutes and whatnot from these meetings kind of take shape, how they get it thrown out there into the media really quickly. But regardless, he had a town hall meeting with the internals at
Mm-hmm.
Bungie and basically said that this was a Bungie decision. He did not throw it back on Sony, and you could argue maybe if that's true or not, but he was basically saying this was a Bungie decision
Who
based
signs his
upon
paycheck?
what they needed to do to keep Destiny up and running, and that the people that were there were the people that were needed to keep Destiny going. Um, so I don't know. Maybe that's true. I'll tell you, although I do think Sony had some influence here, I think a lot of people are looking at this as a Bungie mismanagement issue, which if you look back on the history of not Bungie, I mean, maybe the history of Bungie, but the history of Destiny in particular, this is not the first time. There have been some major mismanagement issues called into
The
question
whole
from
game,
Bungie.
the
Like,
whole initial game's development was
yeah,
could be argued would be
and I think
mismanagement.
everybody wanted to defend Bungie initially when D1 kind of had its struggles. Like, oh, poor Bungie. This was Activision being the, terrible overlords that they were. But then I think it was Schreier that came out and basically said, after doing his in-depth investigation, nope, Bungie just didn't know what they were doing basically at the beginning of Destiny, and they probably still don't know what they're doing, kind of thing. So Activision, once again, I'm sure it had some influence at the time, but that was a Bungie problem, and that's not the first time either. There have been other issues throughout, really Destiny's whole life, where it sounds like Bungie has not handled things well on their own. They were independent for a very long time too, right? After Activision finally let them go, they were on their own for X amount of years. They had plenty of ups and downs during that time, and then ran to Sony, or Sony ran to them, one or the other, but they made a deal there. And regardless if you want to say Sony is the bad guy here, Bungie or their executives made the decision to sell to Sony, right? That wasn't something the entire, Bungie organization or business did, right? That was something the CEOs decided was a good business decision. So if it is Sony deciding to come and, pull out people from their organization and do all these mass layoffs, that's still a Bungie decision, right? I
Mm-hmm.
would still say that was a mismanagement issue initially to make that deal in the first place, leading to this. So whether it be Bungie who made the decision now or Sony, Bungie is certainly not in the clear here, one way or the
My
other. They have done things to lead to this outcome.
an idea. I don't know. I doubt. I don't think it would be the case, but just looking into the whole purchase of Bungie from Sony, do you think there's any chance that that they may have owned? Do you think they actually care about the franchises of Destiny and Marathon, or do you think could it have been a purchase of them just wanting a developer within their houses that just had the framework? Did they just want to see how an online game? Because remember, this Sony has, remember from the last presentation, the showcase they had, the Sony one. I remember us talking about it on the podcast that there was a lot of online multiplayer oriented games, and it's like, do you think back then they were thinking, hey, we need to get them in
Of
here
course they were. Yeah.
because we
I think that was,
remember Bungie also is the ones that got that Last of Us
yeah.
game kind of almost canceled or delayed or
Yeah,
whatever.
that was pretty much stated when Sony bought Bungie, that was one of the primary reasons they were doing it, is they were about to go on this big live service overhaul of many of their games, many of their franchises, whether it be new IPs or not, and turn them into games as a service. And Bungie, for however you want to look at it, and even now, I still think is kind of top dog in that ecosphere, right? I mean, what other game is like Destiny and does as well as Destiny? Plenty of games try, and usually they peter out pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Destiny has showed it had good staying power for whatever reason. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily because their live service model is the best. I think a lot of it comes down to, at its core, Destiny is a good game. Like the gameplay is really solid, the interaction, some of the raid stuff you do is really solid. So there's a good core game there, which I think has helped Destiny persist for a long time. But regardless, I think even though Sony, I'm sure, is looking at, okay, Destiny at the time is still a profitable IP, I don't think that was their primary reason to buy it. I
Mm.
think they were thinking, okay, we got these guys who know what they're doing in live service. You got to think too. I think the thing Sony's looking at is they had really kind of,
Real
I
quick,
don't want to say shoehorned. Oh, go ahead.
just hold your. Or, I don't want you to forget where you're at. Real quick, just
What do you got?
Led Show in chat just says, "Hey, Halloween stream, fire." Okay, sorry,
Wish it was spookier.
sorry
I mean,
about
it is pretty horrific, but
that.
not quite the same.
Again, check out the last pod. That was our Halloween special. Sorry, I don't want to lose your track.
Hey, we are talking about death though today, the death of Bungie. No, um,
I forgot to get the
so I guess
tombstone thing. Whatever you said.
I know he didn't do the rest in peace. But I guess where I was going with that is Sony for the past, couple of decades, past generation, they have honed in on single player games. And to their benefit, right? I mean, where Microsoft has tried to do all sorts of different types of games, Sony has been very pure on single player experience. And for the most part, we've almost seen like a renaissance in single player games in this past, couple of years. Like some major like games have come out and given us some incredible experiences, but those games are really expensive. The long development times, because there's quality and very curated. It's a very curated experience, which means there's a lot of development cost going into that. I
Hmm.
think, not saying that there isn't a lot going to a live service game as well, but it's different. I mean, the structure of the games, the way there's almost a more repetitive nature to it, I think that changes the scope of the game. So I think what they were probably looking at is live service long term might be cheaper to a certain extent and have better long-term, return on investment because the game would then, play out for years and years, microtransactions galore, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe what they found out is that's not quite as easy as they thought. Right? Like Destiny, we played Destiny long enough. I think we saw kind of how it became what it is. It was not a smooth process, right? It wasn't
Hmm.
easy sailing. Going through that whole thing, there were a lot of ups and downs in
It took
Destiny.
that
It took
game
a long time
maybe
to
a
get
year
where
and
it
a
is.
half to like get real good. I think.
And even then, like there were points, I think after a year, and I'm thinking Destiny 1, I think that's when they hit House of Wolves, which I think for many people was another big dip. So
Hmm.
even a year into it, the game was still up in the air. It wasn't until like Taken
Taken
King,
King is when
I
the game
think,
got its was at its best.
and that was like 2 years in.
Yeah.
So point being is, I mean, they definitely treaded those waters to kind of figure out how these live service games work. And I think Sony was hoping that would just translate now that experience into these other projects they want to kind of get off the ground. And maybe that didn't translate as well. I'm not sure exactly what happened behind the scenes that maybe caused that to be the case, but we saw them go through and basically kind of put the nix on the Naughty Dog project. And once again, I'm not saying that was to put Bungie down, saying they should or shouldn't have said that, or put Naughty Dog down, but you were taking devs that were working on single player experiences and trying to get them to make live service games. I don't know if that was a decision that that particular team wanted to make, and it didn't quite work out. So I don't know. I feel like Sony's maybe realizing that their live service goals maybe were a little misplaced. And I don't know if
And
you've seen. I feel like just
uh
live service games in general haven't been as appealing.
I haven't even been playing any Marvel Snap. That's the only one we've played.
Yeah, I mean that's live service but in a different way too. Like a live service game in akin to how like Destiny is.
Yeah.
Like I don't know many other games like that that survive that long. I mean there's a few like what Warframe I know is one that's still really popular that I guess is doing well
Hmm.
enough. But I can't think of many others. And I'm not talking about just like, a competitive shooter, 'cause that's not quite what this is. I
14
mean, although
maybe.
they're
14's been one of the stronger ones too as well for a
but
while.
that but now that's an MMO. Like, hey, where do you differentiate between a
Oh,
standard live service game and an MMO? There are differences.
yeah, that's true.
The scale of the games are different, but
Can I
I don't
also
know. My whole
Or
Go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. No, finish up.
Huh?
No, I was just
I
gonna.
was saying my whole
Or
point is I think you're right. I think that is why Sony wanted Bungie, and I think they're seeing that maybe even that wasn't a great reason to buy them initially, at least not full scale. So they kind of are losing out now on the Destiny aspect of it, as that being a big selling IP, and they're losing out on the potential of Bungie and their experience really benefiting their live service model moving forward.
So I just real quick wanted to throw in one more idea. Now this could also be something I throw in towards the end, but I want to make sure I have it in my head. Um, is it quite possibly like another problem with Sony right now could be that not only are they probably hurting monetarily simply because they're investing all of this into these online games that they may not fully understand how to fully monetize or how to operate, but like could also be another problem that I noticed with Sony is like so, and I've heard it a lot mentioned on a lot of other gaming podcasts, but like Sony has really drifted away from like the indie scene and like smaller-ish games,
Oh
smaller-ish
yeah,
projects.
they've
And
got big budget AAA single.
sorry, say that again. You're cutting out.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just saying, yeah, they've moved immensely away from small scale
Yeah.
games. It's all big budget AAA everything.
So could it be that like, I mean, I know that you need money to also make the smaller games too, but it's like, does it feel like their portfolio has kind of shrunk? Because if you look on Xbox, man, we were just talking about before getting on here about some of the indie games that are on Game Pass that we're excited for. I mean,
Mm.
me and you were both talking about a game like Sea of Stars. There is I forgot, it was like Here Lies the Deep or
A
something.
Cocoon.
Cocoon.
Oh, there's that too.
There's a lot of like really cool indie games that like, and those are smaller titles. Those are like probably 6, 8, 10 hour games. Sea of Stars is probably
Yeah.
longer. I think that's a normal RPG, but like you get what I'm saying. Like is Sony not like just focusing all of their revenue or all of their money into like these big, huge franchises that may not be
It's
giving them
hard to
return?
say. So I think to really put this into perspective, you would have to look at sales numbers, or at least how much profit indies are making versus big AAA games. Because I mean, you're right. Sony's not putting out or associating with as nearly as many indie games, but they just put out Spider-Man,
Yeah.
and that game was the fastest first-party selling game from them
Mm-hmm.
ever right now. I think it's beating out God of War Ragnarok, and once again, I could be a little off on that, but it's selling big, and these are full price games that are coming out, so they're making bank on that. The indie games are not going to sell anywhere near that. So maybe you have 10 indie games. Are they going to come anywhere near the scope of, the return on investment of a Spider-Man? But to be fair, Spider-Man cost how much money to create? So
Marketing
like,
alone
it's
is
a big,
crazy.
and this, I think, the bigger industry with, or bigger issue with like the game dev or not game dev, I should say the game industry as a whole right now. It's real high risk, real high reward, and it's not really sustainable. Like, yeah, Spider-Man was probably their safest bet, to be honest. Like, I don't think anybody thought Spider-Man was not going to do well for multiple reasons, but there's a lot of AAA games that they'll put a lot of money into, and then it doesn't pan out. Like, um, this is not exactly apples to oranges, but I look at like Starfield, and I have more disappointment in Starfield, but that was a big game that took a lot to, I'm sure, invest in, and I don't know how well that's panning out for Microsoft. Now, granted, that's on Game Pass, and maybe they're making up their money in other ways, and that's probably a bad example. I'm trying to think of a AAA game that's really
Starfield is
flopped.
gonna have. I think Starfield, once it gets mods and people start going crazy, that game in about 3, 4, 5 years, that game's
Yeah,
probably
long
gonna have
term,
a
I make it
huge
up.
user base. Yeah, I guarantee you.
I guess I'm trying to think of. I should probably keep on Sony's side. I'm trying to think of like a big AAA game that Sony has put out that has bombed, and
That is,
really they haven't had many.
they had
Because what I'm
that. They
trying
had
to
that recent Forspoken. That was made by
was that
like Square Enix, and that was a
yeah
PlayStation exclusive, and that game
was
bombed
it?
really bad.
I guess my point being is like how many of those bombs with that type of business model can you take before it's unsustainable, right? Like if you're putting out a big AAA game costing hundreds of millions of dollars, but it does well, you're raking in exponentially more cash. But what happens if you put out a few of those big budget games that bomb and you don't even make back your money? You can only
Redfall.
do that so many times. Huh?
Redfall.
Redfall? Yeah. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like Sony hasn't had those issues yet,
Which
but they
it's
could. I
actually
mean, they've
sorry, just thinking on it, it's actually shocking that like Xbox has been able to take the Redfall hits and the Fallout 76 hits, and still like you haven't heard of
Part
like
of it is
many
because
layoffs.
it's
They're a much bigger
Microsoft
company.
behind them. Yeah, like
If
Sony. I mean,
Sony
if you
had
look at
those hits, Sony would be like out of business, baby, or something,
yeah,
or
yeah,
bought out.
Microsoft just has that. It's the Scrooge McDuck money vault, right? It's never ending. So even when they just bomb on something, I'm not saying that they don't take hits and they're not pissing off their investors and it's not a bad thing, but they can recuperate, right? I mean, I'm not saying they still won't do shady things and maybe fire people to cut costs that they don't need to cut, but they have the resources to land back on their feet. If Sony takes too many hits, they're not nearly in the same position to do so. And I think that's partially why they were trying to maybe branch out into live service models a little bit more, because that's recurring revenue stream. It's a model that's been lucrative for other games in the past, and they want a piece of that. I think the issue is maybe they tried to shift too much into it. They're putting a lot of eggs in the Bungie basket, which at this point, not so sure is working out for them. I think to come to that end, we've seen Sony doing some restructuring of their own, which might be impacting, some of the stuff happening at Bungie too. We've seen some senior leadership step down. Obvious one, Jim Ryan retired, or is planning to retire by end of the year or something like that. And I don't know. I'm sure we can't speak specifically to why, but maybe looking at maybe some of the other senior leadership stepping down, maybe it might have some, telling aspects. Like what's her name?
Connie Booth,
Connie
Connie Booth,
Connie
yeah.
Booth. Now was she let go or was she encouraged to step down, or did you see details on that?
Let's see. PlayStation
I
Connie
know the
Booth, who's joined
rumor.
decades ago, left the company. However, the nature of her exit remains a mystery amid a report that she was
Okay.
fired. Representative told Axios that Booth helped drive a success experiencing, helped foster an environment. Uh, it's they're so secretive. It sounds like she may have been let go.
Yeah, so it's rumor mill, but I think the potential thing there is that she was a big proponent and kind of, push for the live service model that Sony tried to adopt. And I think Sony is starting to pull back from it. Maybe Jim Ryan was also a proponent for it. I don't know that for sure. I mean, he hasn't said otherwise, but maybe he's looking at this as his way out of this thing too. That's why he's doing this
It
maybe early retirement. I don't know. This is really speculative, so I apologize if
it
you don't want to
says
dig into wild speculation.
this is kind of weird, but it says here that Booth has yet to comment on her exit from PlayStation, as the nature of her departure is unknown. Hashtag NDA.
Yeah.
uh,
So I mean, it sounds a little more nefarious, maybe, but I don't know. So if any of that is true, it's showing that Sony is rethinking their live service games as a service kind of model, which that recontextualizes Bungie as a purchase, right? I
mhm.
mean, they've already bought them, so it's not like they can go back from that. But if Destiny itself is floundering, so they don't have that as a cash cow essentially, and they're now not wanting to use the Bungie, engineering live service team to influence a live service model for their other IPs. What's the value in Bungie? And I'm curious
In
if that's
name,
what's led
name,
to
name and
this.
legacy alone,
Yeah, and I'm
unfortunately.
not trying to downplay anybody at Bungie. I doubt any of them will ever hear this podcast. We're like, super small fish. But point being is, I certainly value and appreciate the talent in that organization. So it's nothing to do with their abilities. But if Sony's looking at this, they're seeing this now as an entity that maybe isn't going to bring the return on investment that they
Well,
wanted.
it's also like, unlike with Xbox currently, with Xbox, a lot of people have had a lot of these ideals that like all of these different companies Xbox could have. Like everyone's imaginations are running wild with like this company could do the new Banjo game since this Activision company's here, or Obsidian working on a Fallout game. There's so many like cross things that could happen, and the problem with
Mm.
this though is like, let's say they were to want Bungie to work on some other title of a first party game within their repertoire, or their you know their library, and it's like I don't see that as happening because like would you want someone other than Santa Monica making the next God of War? No. Would you want
Yeah.
someone other than Insomniac making a Spider-Man game? No. do you want someone other than Naughty Dog making The Last of Us or Uncharted? It's like, so I
I
don't
think
know
the
if they're gonna
thought
use them for like some other project. I don't know.
I don't
Yeah,
think that will be the case. I if I see any place for Bungie that's non-Destiny or like a goal that Sony might have for them. Remember the big issue with, the whole Microsoft acquisition was Call of Duty, right? And
hmm
Sony fighting to not let go of Call of Duty. And granted, it seems like, they're going to have Call of Duty for a little while, but point being is Sony doesn't have any kind of replacement for Call of Duty, a shooter. What is Bungie known for? Shooters. So if I think Bungie was going to be utilized for anything, it'd be to come up with a more direct competitor to Call of Duty. And not sure if they could ever find something like, I don't think Marathon was going to be that.
maybe let Bungie try Killzone. I know Killzone was their only big like shooter franchise, and that's been dormant for.
Was it Insomniac that did Killzone?
I would have to look that up. Let's see.
Or you can, I think it might have been. Either way, point
If
being
that's the case,
is
you would not
that
want Insomniac because you want their behinds working on Spider-Man. You don't want them.
Spider-Man 3 and 4 and 10. But point being is, I mean, that is another value or kind of, feather in the cap of why Bungie might be of value to Sony moving forward. But here's the thing, their next game they're working on is Marathon. And Marathon's a big unknown. Like, so I guess kind of pulling back a little bit, thinking about what Bungie's now doing. If Marathon is kind of the end game here, I don't know if we mentioned it or if we glossed over it, but Bungie has delayed their next Destiny expansion. So the Final Shape, I think, is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
It was supposed to come out in February. I think we mentioned that. Now it's like June, so it's like mid next year. That's a long time to stretch out content for Destiny. So
So real
with
quick,
that, they've also go ahead.
Killzone is Gorilla. So that's the
Gorilla.
Gorilla is for the
Oh, you know what?
Horizon people.
I'm not thinking Killzone. I'm thinking Resistance.
Oh, that's
Resistance
another
Fallen
that's
Man.
another shooter series though. But
I think that might be Insomniac.
yeah, but Killzone. So basically, but that's also like you would want that's the case, you want them to work on a Horizon. Why pull them off of her if they're working on the third one, which I don't know. But sorry,
Resistance was Insomniac. No, it's fine.
Oh, okay.
My brain was thinking the wrong thing. Point being is they've pushed off their expansion for Destiny. They've also pushed back Marathon. Apparently, it's supposed to come out 2024, and I don't know if that was ever officially confirmed. But now it's slated for sure coming out 2025. So I think it's gonna be hard to stretch Destiny out for an entire year. Because as my personal take, I think after Final Shape, they're done adding new content to Destiny. I think they're going to maintain it and kind of, maybe do some really light content updates here and there, but I don't think you're getting new expansions. I don't think you're getting much in the way of big seasonal changes. I feel like they're winding down Destiny if they're killing off art designers, essentially, right? Engineering is there to maintain. So that means that Destiny or Bungie has to stay alive for a year until Marathon even comes out. That doesn't seem like a really solid plan because Destiny, I think, is going to wane even more. And Marathon is not a guarantee. I mean, it looked cool. I mean, I saw the trailer for Marathon. I'm like, hey, that could be a neat thing. I don't see it being necessarily the big hit that they're wanting it to. It's hard to say. It's way too soon to even declare that. So I don't know.
So
It puts Bungie in a really awkward spot.
So as one of our questions is like, what's next for Bungie? I think that leaves obviously two possibilities. One, you just mentioned it, Destiny just getting shut down or whatnot. But like that also means that if they're kind of discontinuing continued production of it, or if they're, kind of starting to pull some of their people, do you think they want to get like another initial burst of income to try and make up? So maybe rebrand to Destiny 3. Maybe I don't know.
I don't think that
seems expensive though.
I almost don't think I don't think it's possible. Here's the thing. If you're going to create a brand new Destiny 3, you've got to build a new game, right? You got to do new art. You got to do new sound. It's got to feel like a brand new game. And they just got rid of, in my opinion, the essence of Destiny. But beyond the gameplay, you got rid of the art team, the sound designers, and like that's Destiny. So if you've gotten rid of those guys that really kind of painted the character of what this whole game's supposed to be, how can you put out a Destiny 3? That's why I'm even weary of how they could put out another meaningful expansion, at least something that is of any familiar quality to past stuff that Destiny's put out. So I really feel like this is the end of the line for Destiny. And that's why I think it's very sad, because I do, even though I don't play Destiny anymore, I appreciate what Destiny was in my time with it. So I'm sad to see it potentially just die out this way without kind of going out with a bang. It really seems like it's going to go out with a whimper.
So what would...
What?
Oh, go ahead. Finish. No, go ahead.
Well, what are you going to ask?
No, I was just going to say, I just looked it up just because I was curious. Apparently, Bungie has their own proprietary engine, which is interesting, called the Tiger engine. So it's like, I'm assuming that coding would just be something Sony would inhale if they were to go under, right? They would just be like, that's ours, you know?
Yeah, they would own that, to my understanding. I mean, I don't know if there's any kind of clauses that would prevent that, but yeah, but I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. To my understanding, at least back with Destiny 1, that was the reason Destiny 2 had to be created. The engine was so hard to work in. Like, they had cool gameplay implemented inside of it, but as far as like creating content quickly, it was impossible. And from my understanding, Destiny's 2 engine got that way too at a certain point, but I could be mistaken there. Either way, I think Destiny's on a slow burnout, maybe a fast burnout. We'll see. I think they probably... This is going to leave such a bad taste in the mouths of their fans that I think they're going to lose people just because of this negative kind of press and publicity. Yeah. Because there is a big ethical thing here to a certain extent, too. Like, people are still going to play the game. I'm not saying people are all going to hear this and just drop off Destiny immediately, but there's going to be a subset of fans that are core people to the game that are intimately understanding what's happening at the company. They're going to hear this and really feel disheartened about the game, mistrusting of the people behind it, and probably start looking elsewhere as far as things are going to invest their time in.
It's really difficult when your whole game is dictated and revolves around retention and bringing people back. And when people are not confident, or if they feel as though your game is not going to be around, how are you supposed to expect to keep player retention? It's just like,
especially in a game built for transactions where like you want to have them buy cool little trivial shaders or something. That's only cool if you plan on showing people that shader for the foreseeable future. If you think the game's going to shut down or nobody's going to play it in 6 months, why would I spend a dime on any of this extra stuff? But anyway, I think Destiny is on its way out. I'm not sold Marathon's going to be the big winner they want it to be. It's too early to say, but that's a big gamble. I mean, plenty of new AAA games come out all the time and are not great. When Destiny first came out, it was not great. So it's kind of hard to say if this is going to be a hit immediately.
Well, you've got to think...
not...
Oh, sorry, good.
I was just going to say, if it's not, if Marathon underperforms for XYZ reason, I kind of wonder... Well, I don't think it goes under. I see Sony absorbing them, like, more fully. I mean, maybe it's worth them to keep the Bungie name around, maybe not. Here's the other thing to think about what Bungie is now. The developers at Bungie, and I don't know everybody on staff, but to my knowledge, it's not like it's the same team that has existed for the past 20 years, right? It's not the original Bungie that worked on Halo. So you don't have those devs. You've got, Destiny devs, but not nearly as many of them anymore. So by the time you get to that point, what's there of... I don't want to say what's their value, because there's certainly valuable developers there, but you don't have that same core essence, right, of what Bungie was. So why would you keep Bungie as it is? I think at that point, Sony might look at, well, we've got these developers that are good at these tasks. Let's disperse them amongst, and this is what larger publishers or owners do. They take a game dev or game company, and when it's not performing the way they want it to, they just take what they want, disperse it out amongst their other subsidiaries or other game development teams, and absorb them. I kind of fear that might be Bungie's future 2 years from now, 3 years from now. It hinges on Marathon.
Well, what I think would
happen, it's a hard thing.
What I think would happen would be something similar to Raven Software, which if you look at their history, they, I don't remember which games in particular, but they made really notable big games in the 90s and 2000s, and I think eventually they would end up getting purchased by Activision. And if you look at it, for the last 15-20 years, they have just been a development assistance studio where they are just brought on to help Sledgehammer or to help the Modern Warfare guys just finish up production of Call of Duties and stuff. And it's that could be the case where we already know with the Last of Us game. We already know that their expertise is clearly being asked about, and their opinions are being asked about with how other multiplayer PvP games are going. So that could easily be what they become. Is like it's like, oh, we need to bring on the last remaining Bungie guys because we need their assistance on finishing up this multiplayer game, or you know what I mean. Like they could eventually turn into like a Raven. But granted, Raven Software's still around. I mean, that's something. I mean, who knows how many of those people have been let go.
I'm trying to think of example where Sony has done that, where they've like taken a studio and straight up just absorbed them and killed them off. But we do see, and this guy I guess goes into Sony as a company right now, but they've been cutting back in other first party company devs as well, right? Was it Media Molecule? They just
Oh yeah, I have
downsized them. And partially that's because they had their Team for Dreams up and running, kind of keeping that game afloat. They pretty much are done with that, so that team is letting go of those devs so they can start focusing on the next projects. They don't need as many people.
Now they only let go 20 people, but that's because that was a relatively small studio already. It's only like 100 people.
Right.
So
they let go people of Naughty Dog, which I don't remember all the details of that. I don't know if it had to do with I think it had to do with that whole issue with them pulling back on the live service factions style game. I don't remember what it was called. I don't know if you have the details on it, but I think maybe when that got put on hold or on freeze, they kind of reevaluated, those employees as well, and that's when they did the layoffs.
Sources tell Kotaku that no severance is being offered to those currently laid off within Naughty Dog. Remaining employees are being pressured to keep the news quiet. Their contracts won't be officially terminated until the end of October, and they'll be expected to work the rest of the month. Sony did not immediately respond for request.
Yeah.
Great. Good job, guys.
So Sony is certainly willing to, cut costs where need be. And, it's a company. It's going to do that. And I said they don't have the big money bags to fall back on. So they are thinking where they can save on development costs. And it's going to end up being your workforce, unfortunately. So I don't know. I think the future of Bungie is
Ted Bungie?
Is bleak. Yeah, Ted Bungie. I don't know. I don't think this studio will just straight up shut down anytime soon. I said, they're going to put up Marathon. Hopefully, man. I guess they could can that too if it really doesn't look good. If that happens, that's a whole nother thing. But assuming it comes out, it's going to depend on just how good that game is. I can't imagine it's going to be anywhere near as successful as Destiny. I feel like without Destiny, that's going to be hard for Bungie to recover from.
So kind of moving on, since the next question was what's next for PlayStation, I did want to bring up one more little aspect of this in terms of that question. Do you think like what happens with VR if they're hurting this bad and they're sinking money into this peripheral, alter experience in VR? It already sounds like people have been disappointed with 2.
Yeah, I tell you, Sony never. I don't say never, but
it's like the move stick, like all over again. Whatever.
So it's a niche product, and it's a double-edged sword, right? Like it's costly to invest in it because it's a risky thing. It is niche, so you're not going to make probably as much as you want off of it. But if you don't invest in it, why would devs make games
for something that they think is like?
That's the point, right? You have to be willing to basically give more, like over-invest in it for a while to make sure there's something there for people to be interested in and grow that market. Like if they're not dumping resources into VR and giving it lots of meaningful quality games, it's dead already. But we've seen that with the Vita. We've seen that with even the PSVR 1. So I don't know. I don't really foresee them investing in it well enough. And I also don't think that is the platform VR is going to expand the most on. I know PS5s are, the hot commodity. That's still it's not the best selling. Is it higher selling than the Switch? Maybe. I don't think so. I think Switch is still higher than PS5.
Gosh, I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Regardless, PS5 is still great. Okay. Point being though, most people just want the baseline PS5. To invest in the VR system, that is not a cheap add-on.
Almost
for
the
most
same price
people.
as the dang console.
Yeah, so until that becomes far more economically viable for a standard consumer, that's not going to happen. So I have always felt like VR is going to take off with things like the Quest. Like the Quest, I know has grown in price over the past few years, but it's reasonably priced overall. It's like what, $400 or $500. So it's it's still the cost of the PSVR 2, but without the console attached to it. And wireless VR, I think, is just so much more appealing. But I guess where I'm going with this, I don't think Sony's venture into VR is going to be their end game. I'm not saying they're not going to put out good stuff, and it's not going to advance VR in some ways. I just don't think that's the platform VR is going to ever take off mainstream from. So I don't know what the original question was, but I guess where Sony is going from
Yeah,
this.
yeah. That was just a branch
It,
off of where Sony goes from here.
So it is interesting, like looking at what Sony has on the docket moving forward. Like if they're pulling back from live service, that means they're doubling down probably more on single player stuff. What's the next big single player game from them?
Yeah, for 2024.
Because not Marathon anymore. And granted, that was going to be multi-platform anyway, to my knowledge. So it's not like that was exclusive.
Gosh,
We're not going to see another God of War anytime soon.
no
We just saw
Uncharted,
Spider-Man.
no Last of Us. Now
Unless,
there's no Last of Us expansion coming
well, we
out.
don't know if maybe they've been working on Last of Us 3. I don't know. You're gonna have big multi-platform stuff, like you're gonna have GTA 6. I don't know. Like,
Gosh, this is
I haven't.
crazy.
I mean, this is probably something I'm missing. I'm really just trying to think about the big PS IPs and franchises to see maybe what is coming around the corner, but I don't know. It's an interesting place for Sony to be in. And I guess I had a follow-up question. I don't know if you got to that page, but yeah, I know we're talking Sony and Bungie, but I'm kind of curious what's next for Microsoft.
Final Fantasy
like,
Rebirth. That's the next big.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's third party technically, but it is only on their console.
Yeah, I mean that might as well be first party. We haven't seen Final Fantasy game come to Xbox in a while, but I guess point being is this is really Microsoft's big chance, I think, to do a lot, right?
That's they just got the big. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they got the big Activision acquisition, so that's big. They, I think, have more on the slate of potential releases that could come out than PlayStation. And here's what I'm very interested in. Bungie just let go of a lot of very, very talented designers and developers and sound engineers and composers. Wouldn't it be crazy if Microsoft, maybe through 343, snatched up Michael Salvatore? Got him back in the Halo franchise?
That'd be pretty great.
I don't know. I mean, and I don't know.
Apparently Halo Infinite's in a... I've been hearing people are saying the game's really good right now, which, you know, we always kind of thought that would be the case with that game. But I don't know. We're not talking about Xbox.
That game took a long time to get there. I mean, that's another maybe too little too late thing. But point being is there's some talent out there that Microsoft or like Microsoft enabled studios might be able to snatch up out of this acquisition. I mean, you got these devs need jobs, right? And they're going to be trying to get positions wherever they can. Microsoft's got a lot of studios. Maybe some of them might be reaching out. I don't know. Just a thought.
I'm actually thinking I'm trying to find an article, but I remember hearing there was a quote. There was a quote from Jim Ryan, I remember, of him saying that he thought the purchase of Activision Blizzard by Xbox would be a huge hit to Sony. And I don't remember. I'm looking at old articles and I'm not seeing it at all. I'm assuming that again. More points to probably Call of Duty.
Hit. I mean, I think obviously, I mean, even not just Call of Duty. I know that was their big thing, but there's a lot of IPs there. I mean, it's giving Microsoft a lot to work with. Now, it very much depends on how well Microsoft is going to utilize all these new IPs. That's still yet to be seen. I think some people are hopeful, some people are fearful. Like, it could go so many different directions. But in my opinion, I feel like this whole generation is kind of Microsoft's to lose, if that makes sense. Like, I know PlayStation's still way ahead, so it's not like I think they're going to come out of this terribly poor, but Microsoft can make some real big gains this generation. Like, they have some really big platforms through Game Pass. They have a lot of IPs now. The quality still has to be there, which we haven't seen. Like, Redfall was disappointing. In my opinion, Starfield was disappointing, but still.
Conversely to the the 2024 outlook we were just talking about with PS4 or PS5, at least Xbox still has, man, some titles. You know, they at least have, like, what do they have? Fable, they have Hellblade 2, they've got the new Avowed, they've got like a handful of titles. Oh, Perfect Dark is supposed to be
yeah,
somewhere.
they've got a lot of stuff that's way up in the air too, though. We don't know. I mean, at least I don't recall how many of those things will actually come out in 2024.
I just
like,
mean at least they have names that, like, I can put name to face,
There's some things floating out there, sure. Sony's got a little less. I don't know if Sony's gonna do any kind of state of play or anything. Probably not now. I think end of the year stuff's kind of end of the year, so I think we probably won't hear much from them until January, February. But I'm sure they've got stuff cooking. I'm sure they'll surprise us with something. I'm not trying to come all doom and gloom with Sony or whatnot, but they're in a weird spot here where they're clearly cutting back on things. And honestly, that's just the case across the industry. Everybody's cutting back. Everybody's cutting back on people, which is crappy. And I guess the question is, how long can that keep going? I don't know. I know we've thought about, like, everybody's talking, unionize, which is a tricky thing to do. Is that going to solve the problem here, though? Is that going to be feasible? I don't know. But clearly we're in a situation where it's hurting the workforce. And what's a good way to say this? If you dishearten the workforce and they can't, be invested in the projects they're working on, that affects quality of these games too. Like, I think that's a lot at Bungie, what a lot of people are feeling is they invested some of the best hours of their life, probably, right? Working on these games, long hours, crunch time, to get nothing for it. So when they are rehired back on, these great talents that are capable of creating amazing games, are they going to have the motivation to put in those extra hours? And they shouldn't be expected to necessarily, but you're going back into a system that's going to put them back through the same crunch, through the same working conditions, the same uncertainty. That's got to kill motivation and ultimately got to affect the quality of the games we're seeing. I think we see that in things like Redfall, or even smaller games. Like you had the Gollum studio, you had that terrible King Kong game.
I had a topic on that.
The point being is you have these publishers putting these game devs under these really terrible constraints, and you're getting crap products out of it.
That Kong game, I don't know if you read on it, but that developer was given a year to make that game, and people and I don't know, that we'll talk about that later, but that's a whole interesting thing. Is I actually felt kind of bad because I watched one podcast where somebody was they were like, you guys should be ashamed for this game. And I'm like, man, that's kind of mean. Even though
they did the best they could in a year.
I'm like, within a year, they put out a product. Granted, it stinks, but it's should they be ashamed? No. That's a waste of their time and effort, saying something like that. I thought it was
it's crappy because they should be proud of the if they actually put their effort into it, which I would imagine they did, they should be proud of the work they did. It sucks that that's gonna be a hard thing to put on your resume.
I think it was less than 20 people. So it's come on, you get a year for less than 20 people to make a game out of nothing. It's I don't think they should be happy about it, but I don't know. Shame is
some of them. I think I read they were very proud of what they did, what they tried to accomplish within a year. Yeah, public facing, it's not great, but they did the best they could, and we're happy with it.
Anyways, I'm just talking about the constraints. Game making is hard now.
It's true. Game dev has always been hard. I am no in it. I have dabbled with little things, but I understand the pipeline, the constraints of it enough to know how difficult it can be. And I think the thing about this too, when you think about the talent that goes into it, most game devs are in it because they love games. It's a passion thing. Most of them with that skill set, especially if you're thinking from the software engineering side, which is my perspective coming into it. Why, unless they have the passion for it, there's no reason to stay in game dev.
Yeah.
Go get a job at Google or Amazon or some other tech company. You'll make probably more money, I would say more security, but tech in general.
I was going to say job security is probably the biggest thing people look for when they're looking for jobs. Job security, granted pay, obviously, benefits is one, but the most important thing is that you can stay in the
standard
job.
Software company.
Yeah.
Because a game is software. It's a different type of software, but it's software. So if you got the skill to make a game, you can probably make something else. And that's overgeneralization, yes. But point being is these game devs do game dev because they love games. But at a certain point, you're going to kill that passion off by giving them this, uncertainty for, long-term work, crappy working conditions. And there's only so much they can take. They're going to get burnt out, switch to a different domain inside of, software design, or get out of tech altogether. I'm hearing more and more about exodus from the employees that they don't want anything to do with tech anymore because it's either too demanding, unrealistic expectations, or once again, job security just isn't there because we're seeing across the entire tech sector, game dev included, massive layoffs across the board in many, many cases. So I don't know. It's sad because as someone who loves to play games, you want to know that the people who are making them are being taken care of, that they're not only producing stuff that we can enjoy, but they're enjoying the quality of life while they're making it. I mean, you got to think there are people behind our enjoyment. And I think too many people oversimplify it to just be like, I just care about the product. You got to care about the people producing the product too, because it affects how good the product is.
Did you want to real quick throw in your personal experience or possible personal experience with Bungie? I don't know if you want to
I
throw
will
that
not.
in. You won't?
No, I'm going to be a little less candid on that
Less
one.
candid. Okay. I gave you the option.
Yeah.
But
thanks,
yes.
I guess.
So what else do we have? I don't
think
know.
that's it.
Overall, yeah, I would hate to say it, but yeah, kind of a sour sour topic. I mean, as of course, if you guys can tell, what did we make? We made an hour 17 out of it. So it's like I didn't feel like this topic could be done justice with a speedrun topic. I don't know. I felt like there was so much meat on the bone here that I knew we could make an entire thing out of it.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack because it goes beyond just Bungie. This is a game industry issue. This is, of course, a Bungie issue, but then it delves into Sony. It delves into how we interact with the games as consumers too. So keep those in your thoughts and prayers if you guys are listening. For those who just lost their job, I mean, that always is just a kick in the balls, right? So just pray that they find work quickly, that they can get through this holiday season, and hopefully find some enjoyment in the holidays still. I would hate to think that this is going to sour the end of the year for a lot of people when people are supposed to be spending time with family, taking vacations, and now they're in the unemployment line trying to figure out what to do next.
Today's supposed to be a day, people are out trick-or-treating with their youngins, and now they got to like turn around and go home.
Halloween for all these people.
You got to turn around and go home and be like, oh man, how am I going to pay this mortgage now? It's like awful.
Especially because this is, I don't even know if I want to go down this rabbit hole too, but most of these companies, unless you're doing remote work, are in cities that have crazy high cost of living. Like, Bungie's in Seattle. Granted, a lot of their stuff is remote still, but Seattle's crazy.
Yeah. Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
all
so
that crap.
These people now have these crazy, enormous, like probably mortgages and rents and all stuff going on, and they don't have a decent job to pay for it. So I'm sorry, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but keep these people in your thoughts and prayers so they land back on their feet very quickly.
I forgot to ask, how does your Phoenix as a kid? How was your trick or treating? How did that go?
So we did like trunk or treating.
That's right, you did it yesterday or something.
Yeah, whenever Halloween falls on a weekday, it's a little tricky. I'll say my area is not great for trick or treating. I don't know. I don't feel like there's a real big
we only had one group
pushed by the neighbors. I feel like trick or treating, honestly, and this is getting off a sidebar, has kind of died off in our area. I don't know if it's just because the world kind of sucks and you can't trust nobody kind of thing, but yeah, we've done the trunk or treating a lot, which has been easy. There's so many places around where you just walk around.
I hear most people are doing that now. Go into a nicer area, or they do like you were saying. Stuff like that.
It takes some of the fun away. Like when I was a kid, actually going out like with your pillowcase and just like ransacking the neighborhood. It felt more like an achievement when you got candy. But it's safer now. It's still enjoyable. My kid's real young, so she had a good time. I had a good time. It's it's a fun time of the year.
When you're a kid, Halloween is the best day of the year. That candy rush, man.
I always like Christmas, but still, yeah, lots of candy.
I always like Halloween. Halloween. October is my favorite time of the year. This month is like it's my birthday, got Halloween. I love spooky stuff. That's why I'm playing Alan Wake 2 right now. But
I am very interested in Alan Wake, so tell me how that goes. I'm not going to watch any of your stream though.
No, you don't have to.
Not that I ever watch any of your streams.
The game it's super interesting so far. Like I'll say, like, as far as like that is like a common occurrence with Remedy games, man. Is there like I don't know, their like connected world universe thing they have going on is like super interesting. Like all I've been doing is consuming theory videos and people talking about Alan Wake's connection with Control, and Control is just
Control hooked me into the whole Remedyverse thing. Like, I played a little bit of the first Alan Wake, and I played like Max Payne back in the day, but Control really kind of just grabbed me and he yanked me into this whole thing. So I got Alan Wake on my kind of horizon. I'll check out at some point.
I was just gonna say, I have never played the Max Payne games. This has got me like wanting to
Really?
go back and play
Well, they're
those.
remaking it.
I
I
saw. I
mean,
saw.
I think, I mean, I'm sure they're still fun to go back and play, but they won't have any connective tissue to what you're doing now. I am sure the remake will, because you know what's the guy, Sam Lake
Hmm.
is the face of Max Payne, but he's also the voice of Max Payne in a different game. Like, there's some weird overlap there. I think like Max
No, the
Payne
voice of
3, he's the
Max. It's a
voice.
different voice. It's a different voice actor.
Is it?
Yeah.
There's some weird overlap there, though. I don't know. I
But
won't
the
go into
cool
it.
thing is um gosh, again, I've consumed so many like lore videos, theories, but like Alan Wake's book series his big he's a big author. His big series in that series in the game is character's name is Alex Casey, and apparently Alex Casey is basically it's just a story of Max Payne because remember
Hmm.
they don't exactly have the rights to Max Payne because that's owned by Rockstar Games, so he had to come up with a different name. So basically, he has that in his games, just named something different, which is super funny.
Yeah.
And actually, they just announced today. Again, I'll end it soon, but like they just announced today that like Rockstar agreed to do gave them permission to make the remakes. So like,
Hmm.
and they just announced today, of course, because Alan Wake 2 just came out. They're just like, yeah, we're working on it. We're moving on, full steam ahead. So.
Nice.
All right, everybody.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that wraps it up. Like Phoenix said, feel free to send any well wishes towards Sony and any Bungie devs. That's terrible. I mean, I'm sure it's not as easy as the CEO says, and they just just pick up a new job tomorrow. So, okay, next week. We will be doing the next episode of our podcast, so feel free to check that out then. Hopefully, we can get MetalGamer in. He was wanting to spend some family time, so he couldn't join us here. And I don't know, Phoenix, do you got anything to say before we head on out?
Just enjoy your spooky season. It's still technically Halloween, so if you're watching this right now, why? You should be out trick or treating, or at least maybe you're watching this while you're binging on candy. So hopefully it's been enjoyable.
Oh,
But
you're hanging out
either
with
way,
me.
happy Halloween.
Hanging out with me. You're having more fun than anybody else out there.
Oh, you're ruining your Halloween. Get out of here.
Real quick in chat, Carol says, "Happy Halloween, guys! Happy Halloween."
Happy Halloween.
And yeah, that was the ChazmaN podcast.
My
Again,
dad's song before I leave.
again on screen, there's some audio locations that you can check us out there, and there's also some social medias. Feel free down below in the comments. We'd love to hear what are your thoughts on this terrible time for Bungie and what Sony is currently got going on. So, anyways, happy Halloween, everybody. We love you guys, and thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.
See y'all.
See you guys.